Hello there, and welcome to this podcast, which will be discussing the Stand With Her campaign, which is Southwark's 25-26 campaign to engage men of the age of 25 to 45 in promoting male allyship and help prevent violence against women and girls. I'm joined today by fellow members of the community to talk about this issue. I'm going to start handing it around, if I may.
Yeah, hi. My name is Lewis. I live in Peckham in Southwark. I'm a founder of a community interest company called Esports Youth Club. And I've had many other jobs in my life, but that's what I do now for a living. So yeah, very happy to be here. Very happy to talk about male allyship.
Thanks, Harvey.
My name is Harvey. I live in Elephant and Castle. I'm currently working as a part-time youth worker with a Fight for Change, as well as Active Communities Network as a Southwark civic leader. And myself, I'm self-employed as a screen printer and embroidery, doing uniform.
Hi, I'm Nils, and I work for Southwark Council. I don't live in the borough, but I live just outside of the borough. But I've worked in and out of the borough for the past 13 years, I want to say now. So before, I've been at Southwark Council for about 3 years, and before that I did 10 years working for various charities in the community.
I should probably introduce myself. I'm Michael Clark. I'm a programme manager within Southwark Council. I've got a background of working on different projects and programmes related to interventions around domestic abuse, and also things such as Caring Dads, which is kind of community-based, helping fathers to work to recognise the damages they've done to their families and improve their kind of how they set an example for their family and their children going forward. So we have an icebreaker to begin with. That icebreaker is, and I will go the same way around if that's okay, Lewis. The icebreaker for today is, can you think of someone who's made a positive contribution or been a male role model for you in your life?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's a tough one for me because I come from a single parent family. I didn't have many male role models in my life when I was growing up. But yeah, it's always a difficult one for me to answer that. I think for me, one male role model I'd have is actually probably quite similar to a lot of men in my situation. As an Arsenal fan, I think I'll go for Arsene Wenger. The way he conducts himself, kind of on the pitch, off it, the way he cultivates like his group of players and his teams is something that I've always taken inspiration from. So yeah, I'd kick it off with Arsene Wenger, I think.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lewis.
Myself, I would probably say my father. I'm quite fortunate on that side, although I did grow up in a bit of a broken home, not in the same household, so I got to see him on weekends, but I think that was it for me, being able to see that and have that growing up.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. My dad, which, like, from my point of view, probably sounds a bit cliche, but my dad was quite a calm person who tried to value trying to be reasonable more than anything. So he never really he always reasoned with me rather than governing me with a harsh fist, so to speak.
Mine's very similar, and I think it's going to appear like we've all come from a slightly broken home. So it's not my father, but it's actually my brother. So I'm kind of from a kind of broken family, and my parents had a string of other relationships that followed it. And I think that my brother's an example because he sets an example of me being happily married and showing a really fair and equal relationship between him and his partner and in front of his children. And so I don't want him to ever hear this, by the way. It kind of sounds like he sets an example for which wasn't there when I was younger. So I can appreciate that. Right. So we have a set of questions that we're going to discuss throughout this related to male allyship. As I said, we want it to be a free-flowing conversation, so I will try and prompt where possible, but feel free to jump in when you feel you've got something that's kind of pertinent to the conversation or you will really want to say something. So, to begin with, we're looking at a few kind of how our understanding of male allyship works. So I'm just going to open it up to kind of a discussion, just to give if everyone to kind of give out their understanding of what that is and what that may look like. Any volunteers?
I'd say what that might look like is simply standing with our fellow women, whether if that's a sister or your mother, and even just having conversations with women, how they feel at night, whether it's walking safe when it's dark. I mean, in London, it might be a bit different because we have lights 24/7. But out where my sister lives in the countryside, lights off after a certain time, it's pretty much pitch black. So yeah, I'd say just being able to ask around as much as possible, get insight as much as possible, just be there where you can.
Yeah, I think it's surprising actually when you speak to like your female friends, colleagues, and you find out that they actually feel unsafe, like walking home after a night out or even after work, like during winter time. Even in London, where there are a lot of lights and stuff like that, there's still like dark areas, and it's always surprising. Just being an ally just by talking to your female friends, colleagues, whoever it might be, and just understanding and listening to them and kind of gaining their perspective. And I feel like it's always quite an eye-opening experience. I think for me, it's just about kind of like a mutual respect and the idea of equality is, we're equal, right? So it's just about recognizing that and kind of trying to help them feel safe and secure in this, the society that we're living in at the moment, which is a bit of a crazy place at times.
Yeah, I think you both bring up really good points, particularly following the death of Sarah Everard, which we know was done by a police officer on her way home. And I know my female friends have particularly following that have felt very unsafe when kind of maybe having to walk home at night on their own, and will often opt for a taxi or maybe ask one of their friends to kind of walk with them and so on. So it's something that I imagine plays on a lot of women's minds. Nils, have you got anything?
Yeah, I think I liked what you said about mutual respect and the idea of displaying enough sort of empathy and creating a safe space where people feel like they can talk about their experiences openly, in a way, and have the recipient like actually listen to them, as opposed to maybe be dismissive or reductive in how they take that information. And just really, I think like listening is the big bit, isn't it? People sometimes want to be able to sort of talk about how they're feeling without someone coming with a solution.
Yeah, agreed. And what kind of do you find you often have opportunities to kind of, whether it's your family, female members of family or friends or stuff like that, to have kind of those conversations and with them and listen to them? Or is that something that's sometimes quite tricky to maybe broach because it's, a sensitive area, and also being a man, maybe that you're possibly perceived as someone that they can't share with because they might be the person you're afraid of to a certain extent, not generally directly afraid of, but as a whole? Or do you find those conversations are easy to have with women?
I mean, I find it quite easy myself, but that's purely because, like I said before, I worked in the charity sector for about 10 years, which is a really female-centric sector. So it was often the case that as a male, I was the minority in the office. And by having that, so like I can't really tell if it's a situation of like being in the minority that women felt more comfortable talking amongst themselves. But then also, I suppose, like working now in an office which is quite equal, you can't tell maybe what things are being said that are sort of trying to include you in that bit of information, on what things are being held back for fear that it might not be taken seriously.
I was just going to say, I think it's difficult because we're not in the room when those conversations with groups of girls are happening, right? And what they could be talking about. But it does always feel really valuable if you're like down the pub with your friends, and then you can start opening up and talking about, like the Sarah Everard case, for instance. Like, what do you guys think about that and feel about it? But I think those conversations are really great and they're really helpful, but they are few and far between sometimes. The conversations that I'm more in are like the boys' chats that I'm in every day, all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that I'm more exposed to. Apart from in my family home where it's me, my mum, and my sister, and then I can be exposed to the conversations that they're having, which gives me a bit of an insight and understanding, which is really helpful. But those conversations where it's just you and the boys and you're chatting, that's when it's like you can take a leading role in, calling them out and that kind of stuff.
You've lovely segued onto my next question, by the way. So thank you for that. So, yeah, we're kind of thinking about kind of how we can think about allyship in everyday life, and those conversations with the boys in the pub. So, I mean, is there anything like Lewis has just said that we are thinking? Um, there's good opportunities in our everyday life to have those conversations with our kind of male friends, and to kind of try and get them over to the way of thinking of male allyship.
Yeah, definitely. I think amongst male friends, as well as even speaking with female friends as well, kind of getting their thoughts, their perspective, because without their perspective, you're kind of just talking for the sake of talking, because we don't really know what we're talking about sometimes. So I think without that insight, without that perspective, I think that's what's needed, is that insight, that perspective. And I think in terms of allyship, at least amongst myself and the people that I know, maybe the people that are here as well, I can say, I think it's kind of a little unsaid thing where there's constantly this allyship where we want to be able to protect our women, I'm not trying to be what's the word there? Controlling. But to be able to protect women and be able to do what we can, and those we care about, and even those that if we see something on the street, I'll say something like, "Oh, is this person bothering you?" or "Is this okay? There's some argument or something." Even just being there, just for even if it's only for 30 seconds, just to double check and make sure, and just ask the question, rather than just walking past and just being, "Oh, it'll be fine," and then
Yeah, and then you hear it again the next day with someone else completely, don't you?
yeah.
Nils, got anything about that, about how we kind of have those conversations with men around allyship?
I think just there's more subtle ways to do it. So you can have a direct approach where you're sort of calling out your friends on sort of their behaviour and how they address certain things. But I think it's also how we control our own language as well, and how we, I don't know, use language which is as neutral as possible, to sort of, I don't know, I'm coming from a little bit of a different generation, I think, because like I grew up in the 90s, and I think everything was very sort of polarized then in terms of gender. And you only have to look at sort of the older TV programs to sort of see how sex and the differences between
Conforming to
genders.
stereotypes.
Yeah, but then I look at like the language that younger people use now, and how it's the same thing, but maybe just in a different format and a different language, but the intention and the inflection is still there. So I think it's the little things that we do about how we refer to the women in our lives, like, if it's in a negative setting, that it's not focused on things about their behaviour or their appearance, but more about what intention they have and what they're, how they're doing it. I'm trying to think of a working example, like rather than, I think in the past people might say, this, and then use derogatory words towards females, rather than just saying this person. I mean, I think like this, what kind of gives me hope is that the generation that are coming up now seem to be a lot more enlightened and seem to understand where the things are wrong. I see that from the way, like the conversations I have with my son about it, and how he seems to be incredibly much more enlightened than I was when I was his age.
Do you find men are kind of avoidant of having kind of discussions like this?
I wouldn't say avoidant. I would say that it maybe just doesn't happen naturally, as much as maybe it could. That's just from my perspective.
I mean, I think some of them are. I think it depends on it's like a cultural thing, right? Like now, like what you were saying about how in the 90s it was very obviously on TV, the gender stereotypes and stuff, but now it's kind of changed, and it's kind of like you've got that kind of red pill incel culture for like younger kids, getting like super dangerous stuff out there, like the Andrew Tates of the world and whatever. That's really horrible stuff that is, if anything, more extreme than it would have been in the 90s on TV and whatever. And those people, I imagine, would be very reluctant to talk about this kind of thing. But then as well, it's like we can, as men, can take ownership of setting like a bit of like a tone in like the group chats that we're in and that kind of stuff. And some, like when I play football, for instance, the group of lads that I play with there, I would say are a little bit kind of different to like my mates who I've known for years from back home, and we kind of have more conversations about that kind of stuff. But when you see guys on a bit of a less regular basis, that's when the culture, if it's wrong, it can go down like a path which is derogatory to women, even if it's at just a very surface level. It's still wrong, but it does still happen, I think, and that is quite challenging. I think that's where you have to step up and be a bit of like a role model, and again, just trying to improve the culture by calling people out and setting an example, basically. Yeah.
That's that's a really good point. I think there's a couple of things I've drawn on from kind of both what you said around the use of language and the use of tone, and with young people and with mass media and social media and the use of new language that comes in. Now, we all know that we shouldn't be using certain words that are derogatory towards women. However, if young people are hearing stuff online through different types of music and new slang, these words are still there, just represented in a different way, in a new slang way. And so then maybe some of this goes under the radar a bit, or it's not picked up straight away, but that is still being embedded within that young person as they get older through that. There's some questions that we'd like to get onto kind of around what the local community and how the local community works with in regards to male allyship. Now, lots of you work directly within the community and kind of associate with kind of residents, kind of young people, and throughout, men or women. And I'm trying to get an idea of kind of what you think might be kind of ways that we can embed ideas of male allyship in the community, whether that is through kind of doing more stuff with certain groups, or doing more stuff which is publicly accessible to kind of, or inviting people along to learn more, or anything like that. Is there, or there might already be forums that are kind of already out there that we just need to promote more. Has anyone got any thoughts around that?
I don't think I would know too much, really. I'd say over the past year I've been working with communities more actively, rather than kind of just being just a member of a community. I've seen a lot of great things going on in terms of works, collaborations, communities. I don't think I've seen anything bad or that's an honourable mention that's worth mentioning.
So maybe there's something around kind of, I'm not saying I'm sure there is stuff out there, but we're in this room today and we're kind of obviously kind of want to pledge kind of we're ambassadors that want to kind of pledge to this and everything, but for us not to know it means it's probably not getting out there enough, actually. So maybe that is something that we can kind of take back as well, think about how we can actually promote this further in the community. But I got to remember also as well, you brought up a good point about playing football regularly with mates and stuff like this. And in Peckham, in Burgess Park, you have that new sports centre, which is often every night of the week it's packed. And we've got to think whether areas like this might be good for kind of maybe promoting the message or something like that. What are people's thoughts around that kind of approach?
I think that's a great idea. Promoting the message to men specifically is because, as Harvey was saying, like, we know there's stuff out there, but we just don't know like what it is or where it is or anything like that. And I think that would land with a lot of men that wouldn't otherwise consider it, basically, because it's not an issue for us, unfortunately. Well, or, however you want to look at it. But like I work with like girls only groups that set specific like safe spaces up for girls. There's one in North London that I work with called ESP Foundation, and they do like a project called Girls Allowed, and it's basically they rent out a sports hall. There's only girls allowed in the building. All men are kicked out, and all the girls are then able to try out a range of different sports. One of them is gaming. That's what we set up there. But yeah, like that's providing those safe spaces has been really successful for them, and it's really great. And we are trying to emulate that by providing safe spaces in South London as well. And I'm sure there's loads out there. So yeah, it would be great for that to be advertised.
And I think that you bear a good example. You often see gyms that will have days for only women only for those exact reasons, to make sure that they're going off to the gym and they're not being leered on or something like that. Any other thoughts on that around kind of what's happening in the community that either is already promoting or could be kind of an opportunity to kind of actually spread the message more? I mean, within where I live, you get lots of barbershops, for example, and that is often a community hub. And imagine where you are, you're quite near me, aren't you? And there's lots around there. And Friday nights, it's kind of where everyone conglomerates a bit to kind of have their discussion, see how the week's gone. And maybe that's kind of a good point to kind of get the message out. Is there kind of any areas like that we can think of that might also prove beneficial in that sense?
I think in terms of promoting the message, I think it's a really good idea. I mean, obviously, it's a really good idea to have safe spaces for women as well, for women. But I also think there should be. But if we look at sports, for example, it's already quite divided in terms of gender. I think there should be more community projects which are sort of mixing genders together, with the idea that both men and women can kind of communicate with each other what their concerns are, and men can sort of expose themselves to the language that sort of needs to be talked in. I think like when men are together in those settings, the conversations lead sort of in things that are maybe more male orientated. Whereas I think if they understood the viewpoint of women by interacting with them more, with a collective group, then that would be then they'd get something out of it as well. And then women as well. Women would be able to understand where men are coming from a little bit better, and sort of how to communicate with them about and feel safe with how they sort of talk about the concerns that they have, and just create smaller communities. I mean, you guys were talking beforehand about the communities that you came out of from doing the program that you're part of. And then, if you think about that on a larger scale, I think Prince's Trust are a really good organisation for doing that, taking people away on residentials when they're younger and bringing them together so that afterwards they're keeping in contact and having having relationships that sort of carry on for hopefully a long time after. I think that we don't really have a lot of that, or if there is, it's not really advertised.
Anything to add? Don't worry if you don't.
Thought I'd mention that there's a youth club that popped up recently by ACN, Active Communities Network, for specifically for girls only, as a safe space for girls to collaborate with other girls. And I think I'm not sure where it is, but you can find out about it on.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. Yeah, thank you. Right, so we kind of covered off kind of a few different regions there of kind of how we're discussing it in our own kind of social groups to a certain extent, when we're kind of going to pubs and football and stuff like that, and how we get it out in the community. And the kind of common theme is, or some of the themes that are coming up is kind of how we're kind of having those conversations, not just with or how we're listening to the women, but not just how we're listening to women, but also how we're kind of having the conversations with other men. And I think one of the things that's come up is kind of young people and stuff like that. And I know we have some experience of people working with young people here, and I would like to think about essentially kind of what can we do with young men in particular that gets them more involved, more kind of more aware, and get them to kind of see male allyship not as a weakness or not as a flaw or not as something that is going to make them look bad in front of their friends or something like that, and actually encourages them to kind of have a bit of self-awareness and about the issue and take steps to kind of improve the issue where they can. Is there anything we can do to encourage that?
I think it could start from what you were asking in the icebreaker about role models, and being like having more positive male role models, basically, and changing that sense of being a male ally is a weakness to actually it's a strength, because it is. And yeah, like you have to break that in the online space, because that's where the young people are, which is difficult when you're up against algorithms that push kind of hate speech and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I would kind of put all of my energy into, if I could, is kind of building up those male role models, those like influencers that you might follow or whoever, but the good ones and the ones that promote the good stuff that that we believe is a strength and not a weakness.
Yeah, you don't get the ones that are promoting the kind of positive things are not the ones that are making the headlines, are they? So you don't, like you say, you don't get the traffic and the algorithm that kind of sends you to that area. And I think that kind of point about the having young people so influenced by online media can make it a bit so that it's a bit hidden. And but those kind of approaches and feelings of that young people would develop and it's only a matter of time until they start moving from the online arena to real life. So yeah, that's a really good point. Has anyone got any kind of anything to add to that kind of area, particularly around how we kind of work with our young people to kind of make sure that they're not I don't want to say repeating the patterns of the past, but kind of coming around to kind of a better place to where we are now, where there is equality across genders, and that we are focused on making sure that women are safe in the community and that they feel safe.
I'd say leading by example as much as possible. If you see something, try to, of course, don't put yourself in danger or others in danger. But if you can, try to do something about it or get some other people to help if you can't help. Speak about it, call things out for what they are. So if you see something, call it out, even just open a conversation around it. Even if you're not necessarily right or you might even be wrong, just opening it up for conversation is probably a positive thing, because then that's how we talk about these things.
Nils, have you got anything to add to that?
I suppose, and I don't know if this is my perspective of young people, but I think there's definitely like a bigger need for socialisation for young people to sort of actually meet and have face-to-face conversations with each other. Because I think, like, drawing from what you were saying about the algorithms and the online content, I think like it's very easy to shut yourself in and then try and manage your emotions by yourself, and then not really being able to manage them when you come out, or having almost like emulating what you see online when you come out of the house. Whereas that when I think if people have socialised more, they realise that that doesn't actually work in real life, that actually you do have to have some level of emotional intelligence to be able to communicate with people on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's a whole generation of people who are going to be who are, and again, it's a sweeping statement. I'm sorry if I'm wrong when I say that, but I feel like there's going to be a whole generation of people who come out of school and go into the working environment without being really able to express their emotions or thoughts in a constructive way.
And so that's a kind of bit like struggles that young people have had, but during lockdown and kind of when they've returned.
Definitely that generation, yeah.
I think it's about finding a good balance, to be honest, because I come from a gaming background and I grew up playing lots of video games, and the people I follow now, they're still the same people that were making video game content on YouTube like 10 years ago or whatever. But I always say to the young people that come through to our gaming clubs as well, it's kind of like follow the right people, and then also find that balance where you also come outside, integrate with the community, speak with other people, find those role models outside of online and find them in real life as well, through the community, through school or whatever else it might be. So yeah, that's what I'd say. It's about finding a good balance and also meeting the young people where they're at and kind of finding what interests them and then tapping into it.
I think you both kind of touched on a really good point about those face-to-face conversations about issues like this are much more powerful than an online conversation or what someone reads on a forum or sees a stranger put on a YouTube video, because it seems more genuine. And I think that's a kind of a good way to possibly set an example if they're hearing it from someone directly, a bit like we were saying before, someone that they respect or someone that's a role model to them, then it's obviously going to be more impactful on that person, that young person, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'll keep on going. So we're going on some stuff around change actions and essentially about kind of what we can do, what the actions we get out of it, and kind of things that we might do in our everyday life to kind of make women feel safer. And I know we've already said a few things that we're doing ourselves, but is there anything more that we feel that we could get involved with further, or that it would be a good opportunity to kind of once again promote, or stuff that we're not doing at the moment that we should be doing more of? Is there kind of ways of getting involved that you can think of that would make a big difference in Southwark particularly?
I think on a very base level, for me, doing more of kind of checking in with the girls that I know in my life. Again, often it takes like a big event, like the Sarah Everard event or whatever else, for you to kind of check in. But I don't know, it's a good conversation starter. And as you're talking about, it's just talking about it more, basically, is what I think is something that we could all be doing in the group chats when it's just us men, but also more widely, yeah, with our friends, colleagues, whoever it is. And then, yeah, that awareness piece as well about kind of knowing what's out there. And in Southwark in particular, it's kind of like, I wouldn't I wouldn't be able to tell you too much, and I work deeply within the community in Southwark, and that's potentially that's my fault, but also it's kind of like, I don't know, we all have our own kind of echo chambers that we're in, right? So it's just, yeah, about getting the word out there about what is out there that is positive.
I feel there's some pledges that are starting to be formed in people's heads here, so that's always positive. I've got something around kind of how we hold people to account here, and I know we've we've said before that if you see something in the streets, you kind of would say a word, you would have a word, but sometimes it can be quite threatening, and sometimes if it's already looks quite angry a situation, it can also be threatening for the person to say a word. Is there any other ways that people think of approaching situations where they see stuff which is unacceptable in the treatment of women, but necessarily don't feel that they would be comfortable to engage the situation? Is there ways around that, or is different approaches we can take to kind of making sure that we can still support that woman and keep our own safety at the same time in a threatening situation? There might not be. It might just be a call of the police, but it's...
There's that thing they've got on the tube where it says that you should go up and pretend to be their friends or ask for the time or something and sort of steer the conversation so the other person kind of drifts off, which I think is like a nice way. It sounds like a really nice way of diffusing the situation, but then also, yeah, I mean.
And there's also you get in many bars and you go into the toilets and you get, if you're on a date, for ladies, if they're on a date and it's a bit threatening, they can say a name at the bar and stuff like this. They can go to the bar and ask for someone else, and the bar staff then know that they're feeling unsafe as well, which I think sounds quite similar. So there are things in the community as well that kind of, I think they're kind of national campaigns, but maybe something on a smaller scale. So thinking about maybe on the streets, probably not the best place, but say in a workplace, you were to see something that was kind of looked like inappropriate behaviour from a man towards a woman. And I know there's always policies in place and stuff like this, but would you know kind of how to approach that in a workplace? Or
I think it all depends on the situation and the environment, as you say, if it's in a workplace or if it's on the street or if it's in a train station, and what the actual situation is. If you know the person well enough to be able to have a conversation in private, the woman, or to be able to, again, you mentioned policy, to even check with your workplace what the policy is. Is the policy up to date? When was it last updated? How efficient is it? Or can there be any changes or things that could be implemented to make it better, to improve it? And yeah, just being a bit diligent, I think, being quite thorough, just asking questions, just double checking. I don't think it takes that much time to double check something. And I think a lot more people could do it. In terms of on the streets, I mean, I think it'd be good to know some boxing or some sort of martial arts if it does come to that, but of course avoid violence or avoid it in all circumstances. Try to diffuse situations. From my own experience I've actually walked up to some arguments on some occasions. I'd actually say, surprisingly, apologising is quite a good entry. It's like, hey, I'm really sorry to intrude, guys. Just wanted to double check. And even just apologising and just creating some... Diffusing situations can be very difficult, but most important, it's about calming down the two individuals, because most times there's multiple things at play. Sometimes there's your emotions, what you've seen. You might have just seen one small second of it and then made a decision in your head and then come to the completely wrong conclusion. And in other circumstances, you might be right or you might be wrong, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you don't want to risk escalation by kind of kicking off, trying to be like a savior almost. You actually want to go in there and diffuse, de-escalate, get to the root of problems and try and kind of sort it out as best you can without anyone kind of being vulnerable or hurt or anything like that.
I think in the workplace, it can be a little bit trickier because there's so many different factors that go in. So, like, if you say, for example, you know a female colleague very well, and you can see there's someone behaving to her inappropriately, then I think the first thing I do is ask her, if she's all right and what she'd like to do about it. If she needs support in reporting that to a line manager or to HR or whatever. But then I think there's still a fear that if there is a complaint made against someone, that they're rocking the boat to a degree that it might impact their career later on down the line or even immediately as well. So then where do we step in as allies? Because I suppose, like, if you were to go over their head and make a sort of, even if it was an indirect complaint to a line manager and just make them, I just want to make you aware that this has happened, are you then taking license away from the person who's the recipient of that behaviour from doing it themselves? Or are you leading the charge, so to speak, and sort of speaking up when they feel that threatened? So how do you navigate around that situation? I think.
Yeah, because you might be heightening the risk to some degree by kind of trying to take a lead on it, or you might be not necessarily putting someone in more harm, but definitely making someone in the workplace feel uncomfortable if you're to go behind their back, even if it was to kind of help them out. So I think that, I mean, this has come up a few times, having that kind of conversation, supportive conversation before that to see if they are getting the correct support in the workplace, I think is pretty key. And as we've already said, making sure everyone knows that policy always helps.
It's about just listening to women, basically, and in that situation in the workplace or on the street or whatever it might be, like actually fully hearing them, and then hopefully you'll know the best way to progress in terms of a work environment, or you at least get a bit more of a perspective if it's like a heightened situation on the street or something like that. It's just, so I think the bottom line is just like listening and hearing women when they're telling you, because if they're opening up to you and giving that space, then we should respect that, I think, and really listen to it.
So we heard a bit about kind of speaking up in the office and kind of examples of when you've kind of spoken up when you've seen stuff on the street. I mean, I'd like to come a bit back to that. And can we kind of think of some examples around when speaking up when you're seeing something wrong, examples which are not kind of, let's say, obvious examples. So whether someone's kind of in a massive argument with, crying, going on the street, but there's kind of subtle signs throughout society that actually there are kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of men that kind of talk in a misogynist way, perhaps, or kind of use misogynist behaviour. Can you think of examples, similar examples to that, which have kind of that you've witnessed, and also kind of what, not necessarily what you've done about it, but kind of what it might be different from kind of just approaching a situation as well, and to kind of break it up.
I think what might be difficult in terms of being able to approach a situation is that you might not know what to do. You might have your own emotions here. You might even think that maybe if you do get involved, you might make things worse, or you might feel that someone else could do something better, or that you might be like that it's not your job, or you're going somewhere, you're traveling somewhere, or, everyone has their own lives. Everyone has their own things that are going on. And I think that might be because I'll put my hand, I can't say every single time I've seen something, whether it's an argument between a woman and a husband, or whether they're just a couple or a relationship, or if you've just seen that, this person seems to be like walking away somewhere and there's this person following them. It's like, is that person following? And then like one time, I think over myself, I was in Primark in central London, and I saw that I was shopping, and sometimes I can't make my mind up when I'm shopping for stuff. And I was looking at these two things, and I noticed the same girl had walked through like 3 or 4 times, like it was like she was just going through this path, and I was like, what's going on here? So then I'd kind of looked, and then I realized that there was this bloke that I'd seen that was kind of like not fully, like it was just behind her, And then she ended up going somewhere. I ended up just kind of walking down that way naturally. Thought I'd just look and investigate a little bit. Probably just being curious, really, like what was going on here. Is this like me seeing something, or is this just
Do you think your presence being there, just kind of in the background, so that they weren't alone, kind of had an impact upon that, or?
I don't know. I noticed that she stopped by something. I stopped by something else, and in that moment, she then just walked and went off some other way. And then I have no idea to this day. Maybe there in that circumstance, maybe I wasn't being an ally. Maybe there that could have seemed like that I was the one that was following her. I don't know. So it's difficult, you know.
Difficult to see the side. It is difficult to see the signs.
Like, am I helping or am I making something worse? But I suppose it just depends where you see it.
I think you're being aware though, and diligent, like you said earlier, and that's like what's key to being an ally, right? So in terms of like misogyny in like a more casual setting, like what I was talking about earlier, like in a group chat with a bunch of guys, like sometimes people will post stuff that is misogynistic into that group chat and people will laugh at it or whatever. And it's about just in that kind of situation, just kind of not finding it funny, basically, and being like, and recognizing and being aware and being diligent and being like, that was actually, I don't know why you're posting that. It's just like, it's not funny. And you're just sending me a message for no reason, basically. And just kind of like, I don't know, like when I see situations like that, especially if it's my mates or people like that I know, I feel like if anything, I try to like put it back onto them and really like delve into like, but why do you think that's funny though? You know, and get into it.
Question it.
Yeah, question it for sure. Yeah.
I think one of the things I see quite a bit that, like, because I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm trying to work out an example, but I'm lucky that I don't really have people who are acting like that in my sort of sphere. But when I'm on public transport, you do catch like every now and again like a guy looking at us, like putting a stare on, or doing the sort of up and down look, and you just kind of think, well, what can you really do with that? I mean, like in the past, I've stared, like if I see someone staring, like I'll stare at them, but then that's a really stupid thing to do as well, because there's a really fine line between me escalating the situation that could go a completely different way. So, I mean, I suppose, you know, the sort of walking up to someone and maybe asking if they're all right and, you know, maybe not following them when they don't know you from Adam.
Yeah.
But
like if you're out on the street or something, yeah.
Sort of going up next to them and pretending to look at something and just sort of saying over your shoulder, "You're right, I saw this guy like following you. Do you want me to walk with you for a little bit?" Then that's probably like a good way of de-escalating it.
And I think maybe even your physical presence. I only really found this out once I had a girlfriend when I was quite a bit younger for the first time. I think when I was about 17, 18, being about 6'2". And I found out that just walking, I noticed just by walking with my girlfriend at the time, being able to see all of the different guys that was looking at her. And of course, the reason I bring up that age as well is because we're about like 17, 18. You know, like this is a young girl. And I noticed that, you know, you got the older guys, you get everyone is all looking. And the fact that you're there just kind of makes you realize, like, wow, just by my presence being here, I'm diverting attention in a way. Because, you know, someone might approach or might just have a try or whatever, just because they say it's innocent, but they don't realize that it happens all the time.
Can I just say as well, my mates are great, by the way, but they just don't know what they're posting sometimes. So when you question it, you educate them.
I agree. I still have mates that will put silly things on WhatsApp, not really thinking about, and these are kind of groups with girls on them as well, and they have to be. You have to go. You can't be posting that, and also, come on, these are your friends.
Yeah.
I was going to come on to something. Yes. So one of the thoughts I had when you were speaking is, and it's just about kind of in relation to kind of what puts people off from speaking up when they see something, and it's almost there's something a bit quintessentially British about not getting in other people's business, and even when it's kind of something quite extreme like that, I think there's possibly some things that kind of still play in that. It's like, well, it's not really my business. I don't want to get involved, which is understandable to a certain extent might make people feel uncomfortable. However, when it's clearly obvious that it's something that's a bit more than that, that there is someone that is seriously threatened, actually we have to get over that kind of polite Britishness and actually kind of really kind of face up to it, really. So yeah, that's one thing. Stop being so British, I think, is the way I'm leaving with that. Is there anything else that you think that really stops men from speaking up about the issue? I mean, one of the other questions was about it being perceived as a weakness with young people. I think that's not so much the case the older people get, possibly because they get girlfriends and they kind of get to spend that time closer with women that's not maybe their mother or kind of a sister or something like that. But is there anything else that kind of you think would stop people from kind of speaking up?
I would say peer pressure is quite a big one, especially if you're around the same group and they have a certain way of thinking and talking, and you're a bit of an outlier, and you're the one that kind of recognizes that something is wrong. But yeah, like a certain level of peer pressure might stop you from speaking out and that kind of thing. And that's pretty hard to kind of combat. But I think you could do it away from the group. You could like do it slower. You don't have to maybe not do it straight away, but if it's there and you're kind of introducing it, then maybe you could get through it that way. And yeah, as well about your point about kind of being able to speak out and getting over that like kind of Britishness and stuff. I think it's like fostering that sense of community basically in Southwark, in London in general. Like it's about kind of when you see the same people every day walking around your area, like actually saying hello to them and like just making that environment a bit more welcoming and kind of inclusive, I guess.
Yeah, community. I mean, I've only been living in Peckham for about 10 years, but the community is very tight knit, really tight knit, more tight knit than anywhere else I've lived in London. And actually, I like to think that if I was to see something happening on the estate where I live with kind of some of the residents there that I know, that I would be able to kind of step in and kind of say something. However, that's not necessarily the case if I was, say, on, I don't know, the Aylesbury or something like that, which is only across the park, but I don't know that community as well. So yeah, thinking about kind of who you know, the pillars of the community, like some of yourselves, and kind of how we can kind of influence people to kind of be open about having these discussions within their communities, just by doing that to a certain extent, and knowing that people are on the ball and will be looking out for that stuff might actually prevent it from happening more often because they know people are so aware.
I mean, I think there's also something to be said in like the fear of getting it wrong. Like that you point out someone and like we're talking about things that are the one end of the spectrum, which is like either really aggressive language or behaviour, but then with the more subtle sort of behaviours, that if we accuse someone of or pull them up on something and then they're all of a sudden on the defensive because you've basically put them in that position, and you've misread the situation because you don't understand the context behind it. So I think there's a lot to be said there. I think like, so say for example, you know, if you see someone who's being treated differently in the workplace and you feel it's because the sort of procrastinist doesn't like women or is negative towards them because a team member because they're a woman or a member of the public because they're a woman, but then you don't understand the history between those two people, and if there's something else going on in the background that's leading them to be maybe dismissive or I don't know if I'm explaining myself right there. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying. You're saying kind of on any given occasion, without having more contextual information, it's very hard to make the judgment about a situation, so that we possibly feel a bit uncomfortable about getting involved when we don't know all the details, and that puts us off. Is that kind of where you're?
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking more about a time where I sort of spoke to someone after the fact, but I saw a guy flirting with a woman, and I was like, "Are you all right?" After, and she was like, "No, we were flirting." But from where I was sitting, it kind of looked really cringy. Like it wasn't exactly how
Yes,
I would have approached the situation.
I can think of many examples when I was a bit younger, in a club or in a bar or something like that, and it's all quite obvious that the woman doesn't want attention from a certain guy, and the guy might be following and stuff like this. And yeah, doing that check-in, I mean, yeah, and stuff like that is important, isn't it? And making sure that that person is not being harassed. And if that is the case, I suppose these places have security, and as I said earlier on, there's those schemes and stuff like that. We can talk to a bar. But is there? It's very hard on a night out. Say I might have had a drink or whatever, to kind of take that step forward and actually kind of engage on that situation still, isn't it?
I think it's interesting because it's the fear of not speaking out because you're wrong, but then what you're fearful of is male retaliation a lot of the time, which is obviously what we're talking about from our perspective on how we can be better. As maybe another thing is kind of if someone else calls us out or something like that, then we can be like, open to just talking about it, like what you were saying, just having that conversations. And maybe the takeaway is that all men can just be more open with each other about, okay, cool, well, this is actually this because of this or whatever. And, giving that space and not retaliating at each other or at women.
So what would make men feel more encouraged about speaking up? I mean, we kind of have some good ideas here, and as you said, we've got some ideas in the community and so on. But actually, we need to kind of very normalise it in some of these conversations, everyday conversations, not just when they have the white ribbon and the 16 days of action and stuff like that. Actually needs to be normalised in our kind of everyday actions and everyday conversations, to the point that it becomes second nature almost. And I think that's less of a problem with people, some of the people here. But how do we encourage other people that might not necessarily be working, might not work into that way, but might not necessarily approach situations in a way where they feel that speaking up is in the best course of action to do, kind of. I can make that a bit of a simpler question if you want. I kind of waffled on a bit.
I think it's almost like sounding like we're putting ourselves first with that one, but I think like we need to learn how to be more comfortable with each other first, and being able to express ideas without fear of ridicule or shame, and that can look as simple as being able to openly talk about our emotions to a point where we feel comfortable at the end, like later on down the line, to be able to sit there and take ownership over our actions and sort of say, what have I done wrong? Can you help me understand where I've gone wrong in that situation, or why I shouldn't have said that, or what the impact is? I think at the moment people are quite, if you point the finger at someone, they're immediately going to go on the defensive. And I think that it doesn't help that the sort of male, or how men are promoted, and what younger men, or even like men my age, are looking at as the sort of industry standard, is that you've got to have the right material possessions and the right level of confidence and the right lines and the right sort of way that you carry yourself. I think if there was a bit more humility in how we treat each other, that would carry over in how we treat everyone else in our sort of like our worlds.
Removing kind of the one-upmanship over kind of other men, what is how you were suggesting, to kind of be a bit more kind of not see yourself as different from other men, so you can have like a fair and a transparent conversation, rather than seeing them as maybe kind of a rival. Or something like that. Is that so? Starting there, and once we kind of feel comfortable to be able to conduct those conversations between ourselves, then we should be able to be more comfortable conducting those conversations in the wider community.
Yeah. And it's sort of something as simple as, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but when you talk about Britishness and how we sort of communicate with each other, what I've noticed is historically it used to be that people used to take the piss out of each other all the time, and sort of like, oh, if you said something, oh, you're stupid or something like that, or what, like we have that culture of taking the mickey out of each other. But I think what I've noticed recently is people being a lot more removing that element of their language out of it. And then as soon as you start to do that, you realise that with just more positive language, that you build up more stronger friendships with the men in your life, and you also make yourself more approachable for the women in your life to talk to as well, rather than just being dismissive or negative.
Yeah, I think for me it's just going back to the kind of point about like mutual respect and understanding, and kind of just like for men that might be struggling to be an ally in this space, it's kind of like just trying to build it into your mental, like reminding yourself like we are equal. Women face injustices in society that we do not face, so we do not have to remind ourselves. We do not have those trigger points that women have. So it's just kind of like being more kind of conscious in reminding yourself to be that ally and be that approachable, respectable kind of person, and being diligent and aware and that kind of stuff. But it takes active effort, I think.
And yeah, very good point. And I think and this, I think that's something that often comes up as well, is like actually about how we treat our mothers and our sisters and our girlfriends and stuff like that, and why we don't necessarily or treat other people as like we would them to a certain extent. I know we have that relationship, we're close to them, we can have those conversations because we might have grown up together, we live together, whatever. But actually, how can we feel comfortable to spread it out, how we feel and how the respect we have for women that stretches beyond the family border, and actually it comes across in how we interact in wherever it may be, in the workplace, in the pub, with members of the opposite sex. What do you reckon? I mean, I would like to think I don't treat women differently from my sister and stuff like this, but that maybe that's something I need to work on slightly more to kind of actually. I'm very close with my sister, and we can have very frank conversations and very supportive conversations. But maybe that's not necessarily a stance I've taken when trying to support people in my wider life. I don't know for sure. That's just an observation. As is a Southwark scheme that but we're working within the community, so it's hopefully not just kind of people at Southwark Council that will be involved. How can we think about what we're going to do next? What are the next steps? Kind of based upon some of the stuff we've had in this conversation, what could we consider as next steps within the community, within Southwark Council, within London, within the country, whoever it might be, to really promote this, to really think about the actions we can take that will show to women that we are trying to kind of demonstrate that society is equal, that we've got their back, that this place can be safe, and that they shouldn't feel vulnerable. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I think campaigns like this are great to boost awareness. I think that's really important. When you were talking about putting out campaigns in areas where there's a lot of men, I think that's a really good idea.
Would you target particular areas, say like a football ground or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. I think it's, again, about kind of uplifting community leaders, uplifting positive role models, and kind of, letting everyone know about the amazing stuff that is in Southwark, that is out there, maybe just needs a bit of support. Because, I mean, coming from a fan of a community interest company, sometimes it's very hard to get the word out there about the work that you're doing. So Southwark Council could help play a small part in kind of continuing to uplift and promote those spaces.
Would you think about printing some nice T-shirt designs, promote it for a promotion campaign?
That'd actually be a really good idea.
Yeah, well, you were saying earlier on that you've kind of done some for us before.
Yeah, that'd be a really good idea. I mean, if Southwark are willing to put some budget towards that, I think that'd be like a walk-in advertisement, because you'd have people walking around in these T-shirts every day, advertising it. It's like almost like free marketing.
Yeah.
Really, and I think maybe that it might even be something where you could have different designs for different things. Maybe one where it just shows that you're a supporter. So same way you donate to a charity, you're able to donate or provide some incentive or do something, and then you get a T-shirt in a return. It's like, hey, look at me, I'm in my T-shirt, I support this person. You know, it's like wearing the poppy on to support all of the veterans.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to with the White Ribbon Day. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be the 16 days of action. You know, they're really important on the White Ribbon Day. A T-shirt you can wear any day of the year, right? And you can show your support any day of the year. So, maybe we'll speak about that. Nils, have you got anything about to add?
Yeah, I think it's like basically doing something like this, but just keep on expanding it and expanding it and expanding it. So I think you made a really good point about discussing about in male-centric environments like football grounds, but that's not to stop having open conversations in religious institutions and schools and basically anywhere people congregate and have conversations, and just keeping it growing until it's part of normal everyday language, and people feel desensitized about being able to have open conversations about this sort of subject.
And along with that as well, we have our pledges that are coming up as well, which also will contribute to this. I'd like to take the opportunity now to thank the panel for coming along today and giving their thoughts and kind of around this subject, and also being a male ally yourselves. I'm sure we'll see plenty of you in the future, any future campaigns, and I look forward to the T-shirts. And I think I will hand back and we'll move on to pledges.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Having us.